Well, good day, everyone, or good noon, I should say, and welcome to an FS Club webinar, which is going to be quite interesting, particularly in today's times where we're trying to figure out how to square making employees motivated, keeping them around, and handling our finances. So we're going to be looking at how to ensure all employee share plans remain relevant. And our guests today from Equiniti are Graham Bull and Jennifer Rudman. Just before we get on to the presentation today, I'm Michael Mainelli. I'm the Executive Chairman of SAYE Group, and we run the ESOP Center with the help of Malcolm, Fred, and Juliet. And it is my delight, really, to be able to present today because we have a lot to get through. My job is really to get out of your way, and the keynote address by Jennifer and Graham take about 20 minutes, and there's a lot of time for some questions and answers. So I'd encourage you to use the GoToWebinar facility, please, to ask questions. Please don't email me questions because my email's not on and I will only get them afterwards. Use the facility here, and I will try and organize the questions to create a good discussion with Jennifer and Graham about these share plans. Just before I hand over to them, a word of thanks to our sponsors. It's a genuine and sincere word of thanks because what's great about our sponsors is their breadth and range across technology, finance, and social purpose, and how they actually let us work on a variety of topics with no editorial control whatsoever, which is superb, and it allows us to tackle, I think, subjects that other people don't tackle quite as much. So with no further ado, I'm going to move over to both Jennifer and Graham. And Graham, I believe you're going to kick off. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct, Michael. Thank you. And good afternoon, everyone. And you're absolutely right. These are strange times. So just a bit about Equiniti and what we do. We provide services to many of the best known companies, including BT, Lloyds Banking Group, Tesco's, National Grid, and Marks and Spencer's. And our vision is to help businesses and individuals succeed, as well as creating positive experiences for the millions of people who rely on us. EQ has 5 main divisions, and one relevant to this webinar is our boardroom business, which provides a range of services shown here on the right. Jen and I will be talking about the SAYE and SIP products provided under our all-employee share plan business. Next slide, please. As you can imagine, we're very proud to be known as UK leading provider of share register and share plan services, based on both number of participants and market share. And we work with approximately 40% of the FTSE 250. And in fact, we are a FTSE 250 company ourselves. We've been a share plan provider for over 40 years now, and we are exceptionally proud of our strong client fidelity and retention. Whilst our client base has a strong UK feel, we've seen our clients expand globally, so we've responded to that by growing ourselves, and we now have a presence around the world, including US, India, and Europe. Whilst we move to the next slide, do you have anything to add, Jen?
Only that Graham and I have worked for Equiniti for over 30 years each, and not only have experience in administering the share plans, but we participate in Equiniti share plans too. So we can look at this from different viewpoints, including as an employee, as a shareholder, and as an administrator.
Yeah, thanks, Jen. And we certainly have been tracking the Equiniti share price during these recent times. Okay, a bit about the plans themselves. So SAYE was introduced in 1980 and they reached their 40th anniversary recently. And it is a product that has got me interested and ultimately hooked into the industry. The scheme from a participant point of view is probably one of the best and safest financial products out there today. The scheme involves employees saving up to £500 a month for 3 or 5 years, and typically we see this as a 3-year being the most popular, with an option at the end of that period to buy shares at a discount of up to 20% based on the share price at the start of the savings contract. This is known as the option price, and the discount offered is really the reason why this is great from a financial point of view, but why it's also regarded as the safest. The beauty of this plan is that if the share price falls over the savings period, this is sometimes called an underwater option. Employees can just take their money back, making this a low-risk way of saving to buy shares in the company that they work for. So you can see why this is so popular. Now on to the share incentive plan. This plan was introduced in 2000, so while it's not as old as the SAYE, it is well established. An employee can elect to buy shares in the company with a deduction from gross salary. The company can choose to award some additional shares in proportion to the shares bought, and these are known as matching shares. The company can also award free shares which replaced the old profit sharing for those of us who are old enough to remember the old profit sharing schemes. As actual shares are awarded or purchased immediately, dividends are paid straight away. There is a minimum holding period of 3 years for both matching and free shares, and the shares must be held for 5 years in order to gain full tax advantages, which has been subject to many discussions in recent times as it felt that period should be shortened. Over the next few slides, I want to show how popular these plans have been using HMRC's national statistics and some statistics collated by share plan administrators. This chart shows a number of companies that offer a SIP, that's the orange line, and the SAYE, that's the blue line. The dotted line is the average over that period. Whilst this shows that there are increases and decreases over that period, there are not huge swings, and in my experience, it is a pretty stable group. In essence, when a company has set up a plan, they tend to stick with it. And now many companies are offering both a SIP and SAYE. We have seen that with the impact of COVID, the launch of SAYE and SIP plans have been under spotlight, with companies reviewing what should be happening with them. In the main, we're seeing companies continue with their usual launch, with a general assumption that share price will improve again in the future, so recognising the benefit of this to their employees. Some companies that were due to launch a plan for the first time did delay this initially, but many of these are now back in the planning stage. The one area that COVID for me has highlighted is the 5-year tax holding period in respect of the free shares, suggesting that the SIP tax sort of advantage period of 5 years is just too long, with a number of companies choosing a non-tax efficient route to reward their employees, with free shares being given under a conditional share award, for example, with a holding period of 12 months, 18 months. The fact that over 1,000 companies run either a SIP or SAYE proves to me that they're still highly valued today. Next slide, please. This graph is on participation rates. What I know from my experience is that there are two different types of behaviours. Core repeat users. As one scheme finishes, they reinvest the same amount into a new scheme. Many of these will use this as purely a saving plan. Then you get your market influencers. This group will happily pull out of schemes that are underwater and reinvest the money into new, cheaper schemes for the future. For example, in the assumed lower market we have today, caused by COVID crisis, we have seen some large withdrawals, but more so, we've seen some record number participation rates for new launches. What this tells me is employees have a belief in the future state of the company and that share prices will rise, and hopefully they will make some money. For example, Smiths Group, a technology and engineering business, their latest SAYE launch in April attracted 54% of its eligible employees to join. And they now have 6 in every 10 employees participating in a plan. The option price was set at just over £9, with the current share price now at £13. That's a 44% profit. Another example, BT, launched their SAYE plan in May, and they've seen a 30% rise in participation compared to last year, and a staggering 47% increase in savings value. With an option price of 92p for their 3-year plan and 82p for their 5-year plan, and a current share price of around £1.20, they could also be looking at sizable gains come maturity. And don't forget, with SAYE, employees do have the reassurances that they can get their money back if the share price falls. With SIP, we've seen a slight increase in those joining the plans, suggesting that participants want to take advantage of the current stock market. But it is early days, and data is not always consistent. Next slide, please. This next slide looks at the initial value of shares awarded at each launch. This chart was interesting to me. What I found is that there is a correlation to the stock market in that when the FTSE falls, we tend to see a peak in participation rates and investment increases. The peak in 2015 and 16 you see here coincides with the FTSE 100 index fall for the same period, which was known as the investors' stock market sell-off, which went from 7,000 to just under 6,000 points. And you see again that in 2017, you'll see that rates tend to fall. However, the stock market actually rose to 7,200 points, which is in contrast to the chart we're looking at here. So in conclusion, what does these stats actually mean? To me, it shows that SAYE and SIP are still very, very much valued and are relevant and popular with both issuers and employees today. Participants are aware of the market and will respond as such. However, There is still a large group of employees that don't participate, either because they don't understand them, or worse still, they don't know they exist. Jen will now cover off these challenges and other barriers to a successful share plan. Over to you, Jen.
Thanks, Graham. So over the next 3 slides, I want to look firstly at some of the things that companies consider when deciding to launch a new all-employee share plan, some of the challenges they face. Next, I'll have a look at some of the things that can have a positive influence on these share plans. And thirdly, some suggestions about how the plans could be changed in the future to make them even more popular. So next slide, please. So for some of the challenges, the first set relates to companies. There are, of course, costs with running share plans. And in addition to setup costs, there are ongoing costs for administration. Additionally, the plan shares will need sourcing either from a new issue of shares or using shares already held in an EBT, that's an employment benefit trust. And again, there's a cost to the company for doing this. With share incentive plans, shares are put into a SIP trust as soon as free and matching shares are awarded. Though with purchase shares, these are often market purchased using the employee's salary deductions. With SAYE, most shares are issued at the end of the 3 or 5 year savings period, though there is an accounting impact for granting options. And for SAYE, the fair value of an option is treated as an expense through IFRS 2 reporting. There are other considerations, and where a company has a global structure, implementing a UK tax advantage plan may mean that employees based in other countries may expect a benefit of a similar nature. And indeed, there are a number of companies who set up international SAYE type plans or international purchase schemes, or indeed provide international free share awards. And just for private companies, there's also a requirement to obtain a shares and assets valuation through HMRC. And a further consideration where new issue shares are being used, this relates to dilution. So a company should not issue more than 10% of the issued ordinary share capital in any rolling 10-year period, of which executive schemes should not exceed 5%. So headroom or dilution needs to be considered if using new issued shares. So just moving across to the second column, and employment status. Employees and directors can be invited to join tax advantage share plans. However, the company may use agency staff or those categorised as self-employed and contractors, who may therefore not be able to join the plan as they're not regarded as employees. And in addition, a whole section of employees, those working in the public sector, are excluded from these plans as there are no company shares. So moving on, from an employee point of view, from research carried out, we do know that the key reasons for not joining are linked to a lack of spare income to purchase shares, concerns about shares declining in value, and it may be that they've already had some experience with previous share price falls. They may have a fear of owning shares and the associated risks, or they don't expect to be with the company long enough to benefit. Additionally, they may have other arrangements for their savings, or just not interested in participating, or don't understand the plan. So next slide, please, because it would be good to look on how to overcome some of these challenges. So what are some of the positive influences? Well, we often see companies when first listed on the stock exchange through an IPO, so an initial public offer, looking at introducing an all-employee share plan as a way of incentivizing their employees, and in some cases with an award of free shares to thank their employees for helping get the company to listing. Also, internal pressure from employees asking for share plans can be a very positive influence. The next point on the slide about national insurance contributions is an interesting one in relation to share incentive plans. Employees contributing to a SIP have deductions from gross salary, which means that not only do employees benefit from NIC savings, but employees have NIC savings too. And those savings can be important when justifying the cost of the SIP. There are also corporation tax deductions available for the costs of the plans. In relation to employment status and enabling as many employees as possible to join, some of the things that can help include having a short eligibility period before employees can participate, And certainly with SAYE, where there is often an annual invitation, having a short eligibility period is common, with over 60% of companies having a period of 3 months or less. Another thing to consider with a group structure and a number of group companies are the subsidiaries that are invited to join, and enabling as many as possible to become participating companies will help. And then just moving across to employees, some of the things that can encourage employees to participate are having the full 20% option discount for SAYE and having a strong matching ratio for SIPs. Having an award of free shares will, of course, extend participation, especially where the free shares are awarded on an opt-out basis rather than asking employees to opt in to receive those free shares. One thing that has changed recently in relation to SAYE was extending the savings payment holiday so employees can choose to temporarily stop contributions for up to 12 months, overcoming the worry about affordability, for example, where someone is working variable hours. So next slide, please. So for this third link slide, we want to look at some ideas about how to supercharge these plans and make them even more popular. So the first set of ideas are around how to encourage all companies to offer an all-employee plan. So in effect, setting an expectation that broad-based plans should be offered by all companies. So how do you do that? Well, some ideas that have been discussed include asking companies to make it transparent if they don't offer an all-employee plan. So in effect, asking them to explain why they don't provide an all-employee plan. Another idea that has been suggested previously is to provide additional corporation tax benefits for companies with these plans. And a further suggestion is somehow to enable all employees to automatically be opted into a share plan with an opt-out facilities. So following pension auto-enrollment type principles. And then in relation to employment status, it would be good to review whether the rules could be changed to extend eligibility to more classes of workers. So Graham, what do you think of these ideas and can they work?
Certainly applying some kind of pressure to nudge companies to provide an all-employee plan would help. I'm not sure that we could go as far as forcing companies to do it. Out of fairness, if there is an executive plan in place, then why shouldn't all employees also have some kind of share ownership stake too? Regarding auto-enrollment, that will certainly increase take-up and help promote the plans from a financial well-being point of view. But there are a couple of things that need to be ironed out here, in my view, such as determining the level of savings for an auto-enrollment to apply, and which product do you also apply that to. With SAYE and its low-risk nature, employees will always be able to get their savings back, though SIP is obviously a different matter. And re-corporation tax incentives, that would obviously be fantastic. That was with most things. Persuading the Chancellor as to its benefits will be key for that one, I think.
Jennifer? Jennifer, somebody out here in the audience just kind of curious about, could you just explain what you meant by set a common minimum expectation? Was that you meant throughout society, or did you mean with government? Just what were you after there?
Amongst companies. So a lot of companies do already provide these plans, but there are some that don't. So it's trying to build up an expectation that, like company peer pressure, that we should be expected that companies provide an all-employee plan. Most companies do have executive plans, but not all of them have all-employee plans. So it's to build that general feeling that companies should have an all-employee plan.
Thank you.
And I think just to add to that a little bit as well is that, and if they don't, there may be good reasons why they're not, but actually then to come forth and actually explain that away, explain why they're not providing such an all-employee share plan. I mean, it may be that they want to push all their benefits into other things that the company wants to provide, such as cash. So they're the sort of things that we're trying to bring out here.
Great.
Just on some other ideas then, well, one of the key ones that we've been asked for many, many years is a change to share incentive plans. At the moment, you have to hold shares for 5 years before the full tax benefits are earned, and reducing the tax-free period to 3 years would act as a great stimulus and also brings the time period in line with the other 3-year savings period for SAYE, and also aligns with discretionary plans that tend to be a minimum of 3 years too.
Yeah, and nowadays I think that new employees don't see themselves as working for a company for say 5 years, and in fact some are, slightly encouraged not to in order to gain experience. So yes, a 3-year term is, in my mind, a little bit more aligned to maybe employees' expectation.
And again, Jennifer, if you wouldn't mind, just somebody's asking on extending the good leaver provisions. What are they at the moment, and what were you proposing to extend them to?
Right, so I'm just going to come on to explaining about the good and bad leaver principles. So basically, there is a concept about employees who leave for reasons such as retirement and redundancy, and they're the ones that we classify as good leavers, versus someone who resigns and is classified as a bad leaver. So whereas good leavers can benefit from their share plan on leaving, bad leavers often don't get the full benefits. So one of the suggestions is it would be helpful to bring in some kind of flexibility so that companies, if they wish to, can extend the good leaver benefits to employees who resign.
Very good. Thank you.
Jen, did you want to talk around the look-back facility on SAYE?
Yeah. So one last thing that we would like to propose, and one that is relevant today and supported by the ESOP Centre, relates to SAYE and how the option price is determined. So currently the option price is set at the plan's invitation with up to a 20% discount to the current market price. The fair value of the option is then accounted for over the savings term under IFRS 2. And if the share price rises over the 3 or 5 year savings term and there is a gain at maturity, there can be value against the IFRS 2 charge. Plus, there could be a corporation tax deductions for the difference between the share's market value and option price. However, where there is a fall in the company's share price, the scheme will be underwater. And in these instances, employees don't buy shares under option and just take back their savings. So there are no gains, even though there has been an IFRS 2 charge. So the proposal we have is to set the option price at maturity and set the maximum number of shares under option. And then just prior to the scheme's maturity, reset the option price if it's underwater. So we're referring to this as SAYE look back.
So basically what we're saying here is that unless there is a sudden drop in the share price at maturity, there will always be a gain and people will stay engaged. I mean, certainly I can see the positives in that. There will certainly be fewer withdrawals and hence no acceleration of the IFRS 2 charge, which is highly penalising in a falling market. I can see this being very popular to all parties. So, Jen, of everything that you've spoke about there, what would you put top of your list?
Well, I think I'd love for companies to have a tax incentive to run an all-employee plan, and reducing the tax-free period for SIPs to 3 years is something that we've wanted for such a long time. I think right now, and with the impact of COVID, I think the SAYE look back just about tops my list.
Yeah, well, I tell you what, you take the SAYE look back. I'm gonna stick with the SIP and reducing the SIP tax-free period. So that means both plans get a bit of a boost or a supercharge, as you said earlier. Michael, we'll ask for you for your favourite when we get to the Q&A section, if that's okay.
I'll be ready.
That takes us nicely on to next slide, please. Sorry, that takes us nicely on to how to make a success of a current plan. For me, leadership is absolutely key. An active interest by the CEO and the leadership team is so important. Guy Wakely, who is our CEO, is very active during the launch period, promoting the scheme and its benefits. And this really helps employees read the communication, understand the plan, and ultimately what we really want them to do is be able to make an informed choice. Having a strong consultation phase is also a top tip. To get employees involved in this process will help you come up with the best ways to communicate, both in terms of what to say and how best to say it. This I also find to be the most exciting part of the process, as it drives new ideas and new thinking. Next comes the creation phase, and this starts to bring your previous thinking together, and the comms start to really take shape. The final part is the actual delivery, agreeing who, how, the timing, and the types of channels to use. The variety is endless. You can use brochures, promotional work, emails, the use of web graphics, microsites, and animation, road shows and employee presentations, which should really be run by plan champions. Use of internal systems to aid messaging, or the good old-fashioned way of using magazines and company newsletters, all can be used. It is important to remember that as you go through the consult, create, deliver phases, that you throw back to the challenges that Jen mentioned earlier that you need to overcome. Highlight the fact that you can save from as little as £5 a month. State how many others are in the plan already. They often feel safe in numbers. And how they have benefited. Use case studies where possible. Keep things simple and segment mail-ins into group recipients to make it look more personalised. All these things tend to work really well. Next slide, please. Sorry, Jen, as we move on, was there anything you wanted to add to those top tips?
Only about word of mouth and peer pressure and discussion. I think it's really, really good to get people talking, and especially where people haven't joined plans before, having a discussion with somebody that they work for or with is really, really important. And certainly from my point of view, that's how I joined the plans right at the beginning, years and years ago, because my manager said, you don't have a choice, I have to join. So yeah, a bit of peer pressure works. I think the same was for you as well, wasn't it, Graham?
No, you're absolutely right. I think I remember working on a bank of a team of six, a bank of 6 desks. It was on the old Abbey National flotation from memory, and the managers come round and said, you must sign this bit of paper. And at the time, I didn't have a lot of money, but I was really glad in the end that I was forced to do it. And it was the reason why I got into employee share plans, as I mentioned earlier. So, it's I completely agree. Peer pressure sometimes is the right way forward. But personally, these have been going for 40 years. I think they've got wonderful benefits. Question is, will they be here for the next 40 years? I know you've got a bit of nostalgia, haven't you, Jen? You want to slow on the next slide?
Yeah. So just on this next slide, I'm not sure if you can actually read this, but this HM Treasury document goes back to 1993 when Norman Lamont was Chancellor of the Exchequer. And this document states that successful companies depend on having committed, motivated employees, and companies find that the best way is to give employees a stake in the business. So certainly within that booklet, there was a case study about Sainsbury's, who are still running their share plans today, including both SAYE and SIP. So next slide, please.
So I think you've probably heard from both Jen and I now for a while, and really, hopefully you've seen the remarkable benefits that these schemes provide. And obviously, as it's been my working life for the last 30 years, I'm going to have to say that, yes, that these plans will continue for another 40 years. But I do think we do need a few tweaks and support by the Chancellor, and I believe we could make them even better than they are today. Next slide, please. And I think back to you now, Michael.
Wow. Well, that was a heck of a tour de force, both of you. Well done. You covered a lot of ground and clearly a tremendous amount of audience interest here. Just to kick off, there are quite a few comments here. There's a question, I think it's directed at you, Jennifer, if you don't mind. It had to do with headroom. Would you just mind explaining that term to the audience?
In relation to companies and issuing newly issued shares, you've got this 10% limit over a 10-year period. So if the company has already been launching plans for a number of years, they've obviously, and they've been issuing new shares as part of those plans, they've been using up that 10% limit over a period of time. So headroom then links back to what amount of shares are left that they can newly issue. And what some companies do is if they do a new SAYE plan, they may set aside a certain number of shares that they'll grant for that plan. And what they can do is put that into the launch documentation to say, oh, there's 2 million shares that are available for this launch. And if the subscriptions are over that amount, then they do what they call a scale back. So if somebody applies to save £100, they maybe scale back to £80 so that they've got enough newly issued shares at the end of the plan to satisfy all the shares that are under that option. So that's the kind of headroom for a company. There is a lower level headroom which relates to employees and SAYE. So there is a maximum amount that they can save per month. So if they're already saving £200 in a plan, their headroom then for the next launch would be £300. So there's two levels of headroom there.
Graham, there's a question here. I think this might be you, but it might also be Jennifer. But you used the term underwater. Could you just give an illustration of that, as opposed to do define it, but also an illustration of it?
Yeah, of course. So let's take it a very, very simple share price today. Let's just take it as £1.20. And if at the point of the award, they choose to use the full 20% discount, you would actually get an option price of £1. If during the 3-year journey, that share price was to drop, and say it dropped to 50 pence, you are now 50p underwater. So 50p under the option price. So that is the term underwater. At that point, it would not really be in your interest to exercise your option and to acquire shares at the £1, because actually you could go into the marketplace and buy them for 50 pence. Obviously, we hope, and so in that case, what you do is you'd ask for your money back. Hopefully, what we do see is it may drop for a period of time underwater, but by the time you reach 3 years or 5 years, we hope that share price would have increased to £1.50. So therefore, you would then be buying shares, and that's called above water. Therefore, you would then be buying shares at £1 and hopefully then trading them out at £1.50, making a 50p gain per share. So that's the idea of the scheme. And what as I said before, in the beauty of this is, if you are in an underwater position at the point of the 3 years, at the point of maturity, or 5 years, you can just take your money back. And I think that's what makes this one of the most safest products on the marketplace.
And it's one of the things that's really relevant at the moment, obviously with COVID and the dip in the share prices. So the number of companies who had above water options at the end of the 2019 compared with the number that then went underwater, say in March and April time, there was a significant change, and quite a number of companies now have underwater options. But there is a period of 6 months in which you can exercise your options. So hopefully within the next 4 or 5 months, some of the prices will go up. But certainly at the moment, there are a number of underwater options.
Mm-hmm. There's a question here as well about furlough. When staff are furloughed, does that affect their status?
HMRC did confirm this quite recently, but employees on furlough, their salary is being paid through payroll, and so they can still participate in SAYE and SIP. The only thing is, if they're on 80% salary, there is an affordability issue potentially for some people. But at the moment, no, they can still continue participating in both those plans because of furlough, which is good. I mean, I think the change will come at the end of furlough, and then there may be a bit of a change in that situation.
Graham, a question for you. In your opening comments, you made a remark that the money was always there, that you couldn't lose money. And one of our viewers is, well, where's it being held? How do I know the money is safe?
So, there's two elements to Sharesave. You've got the savings contract, and then you've got the holding of options. So we actually hold the options as an administrator, but the savings contract is taken out with a bank, a savings carrier bank that is approved. Now, the ones that we use is Lloyds Banking Group, so they would hold the funds, and therefore there is a contract between the individual and the bank, and it is fully FSCS protected.
Great. I've got a question here. I'll read it out. It's actually from Fred Hackworth, who composes Newspad, but I think it's a really interesting discussion question. How can the shares for salary concept best be implemented in those UK companies who are planning to cut their payrolls as soon as the government's job subsidy schemes are run down? And I think in the spirit of candor, I certainly know a lot of companies who are sort of, well, I'll leave people on furlough, but I'm not 100% sure what I'm going to do when this runs out, and it's not looking very good. So I appreciate some
Yeah, I
thoughts.
can.
Perhaps, Graham, you can kick off.
Yeah, I think Jen mentioned it earlier around the good leaver reason. So she mentioned the fact that retirement, redundancy are a good lever option. So what that means is that people then can use their savings they've had to date to then exercise, or if you're in the SIP, the savings and the shares that you've acquired can then be readily available to you tax-free. So I completely appreciate what you're saying there, but I think these plans have got a built-in lever reason, which says that if the event that companies need to restructure or reduce in size, then if they did so and they did it through the right means, through redundancy, etc., then absolutely these people would still benefit. So even if they've only got 6 months worth of savings at that point at a 20% discount, they would benefit from that. So I don't think that's. I think the schemes have these lever reasons built already in them that will give companies the flexibilities to feel that they can launch today, even if they know there is a possibility in the future that they may have to restructure due to the economic impact of COVID and whatever may be coming next.
And of course, because we're looking at the 5-year rule anyway, the sooner you get started, assuming that there's no improvement to that.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right there, Michael. Yeah, as soon as you start, then you can your 3-year or your 5-year horizons. So yeah, absolutely.
One of the good things about the good leaver reason under SIP, for example, they are good levers and they can exit the plan tax free. So, for good levers, there is no requirement to have to hold on to the shares for the 3 or 5 years. In fact, they have to come out of the plan. But because they have to come out of the plan and they're a good lever, they don't lose the tax benefits. So that's one of the good things. I think there's another point here around what we're seeing with companies and cash retention. They're certainly looking at different ways of keeping cash within the company at the moment. And we've got a whole number of companies who are using their share plans as a way of rewarding employees, or in fact paying out in shares rather than cash. So we've got some companies who are giving out conditional share awards in place of part of their salary. So there are different ways of using share plans at the moment to either reward employees or because of cash retention reasons that are really quite interesting. I think there'll be quite a number of case studies that come up over the years on how share plans were used over this period of time.
Funnily enough, that plays right into a couple of comments here. I'm going to try and shape them because they're a bit disparate, but I think the basic thrust is something along the lines of, in your experience, both of you, because you've seen this, and what you just mentioned effectively, Jennifer, which is the fact this is part of overall compensation. So I can easily say to somebody, you're getting shares, you're getting a scheme, but I'm expecting to see a little bit of a reduction in actual cash outflow. Are there any norms in this space? And I know that every scheme is different, the companies are different, the share valuations are all different, but I put a scheme like this in place, I'm extremely generous. Should I expect any salary reduction, or should I be able to say to employees I'd expect to see 5, 10, something like that? Are there any norms?
I've been looking at about 8 recently, and every single one is structured slightly differently. So it really, really depends on, what the company is looking to achieve, whether it's the reward or whether it's cash retention, or whether it's instead of paying out cash bonuses, they're paying out share bonuses instead. So there isn't any actual norm at the moment, I have to say. Everybody's coming up with creative ideas, which is good.
It's a bit more broad-ranging question here. It's from a fairly frequent listener who I think is always good on the geopolitical issues. But he points out that Sustainable Development Goal 10, which is about reducing inequality, clearly features in this sort of sharing, caring capitalism that people like to talk about. Do you think employers are missing a trick? In other words, expecting post-COVID to see a lot of reaction in the public mind about companies that employers should be doing this simply as part of reducing inequality and showing that we're all in it together.
Well, that's definitely a theme that we would like to promote. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and I think these plans are all employee plans. So by nature of their name, it suggests to me that it should be open and freely available to all employees. And I think the savings levels that are applied to these plans now means that £5 it is affordable. So I'm very much of the view that these things are great, and we've got to get people recognising these plans and using them as much as they can, because I do believe they can generate an increase in wealth, which has got to be a good thing across the nation.
We've got time for just two questions. Sorry, Jennifer. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say one of the other benefits is around you're encouraging people, like Graham and I. We started when we first joined, and there's this whole thing about getting into the culture of saving, and I think we really need to be going back to that, getting people encouraging into saving, because there is a huge amount of stress out there related to financial worries. So if you get people into these plans, they can save over a 3-year period and actually see some kind of reward at it, but it's just getting them into that habit in the first place.
Yeah, and I think, just sorry to labour the point, I mean, what we also seen is that people who join these plans, when they come up to the next launch, they then add a little bit more, and they add a little bit more. They don't tend to go for the 400 or 500, because not everyone's at the position that can afford that. But what they're able to do is just push that little bit more. And therefore, their savings levels may go from £20 to up to £50 over the case of 3 or 4 years, and then they start to get some sizable returns, especially during periods of time of stock market growth.
Yeah, it was interesting for me to see Norman Lamont's signature there. It was a bit of a blast from the past, because it was just after that period from the first privatizations in '84, where they were almost at the high point of what was then shareholder capitalism. But I happen to think that the whole shareholder capitalism concept of spreading wealth across society and getting people engaged in the economy, and I'm not a big fan of the word capitalist, but the markets is a good one, and we seem to be coming back to that. But we've got two more questions quickly then, and the first one is a bit contentious in a way, pointing out basically that let's take Enron and the U.S. and we had all these 401ks, and they increased concentration, so that employees found that they had far too much in the company. Do you not feel that this is encouraging that, or what's your response to that?
Well, SAYE, you're kind of okay, because if the share price dips, you've got that kind of low risk element of it as well. And certainly under share incentive plans, you're right. And some of the values for some of the employees who have been in it for quite a long time, you can be looking at maybe £150,000 worth of shares within their share incentive plan. So what Graham and the team have been doing is making sure that where necessary, we run programs under the SIP to promote the fact that available shares are there and they can be sold, and diversification is a good thing. So you're absolutely right. Putting all your, as we used to say, eggs in one basket is not always the right thing to do. And certainly, periods like this where the share price has fallen and you've got, some kind of perceived loss within the SIP, even though that you can hold on to them for a period of time, it does bring it to the forefront that there is some risk attached to that.
Yeah, I think the key message here for me is people need to regularly check how many shares they've got at available status that they've built up maybe in the company in which they work, by checking how much those shares are actually worth. Very much like you would do with your bank account, really, and your online banking. Portals are there now that enables people to do that, and I think there's lots of products either at maturity or post vesting that people can use to diversify that investment, moving them into ISAs and into LISAs, etc. So for me, it's around education, and that's where it's key. You come back to this communication again. So we've talked about here communication at launch. It's equally as important to talk around that communication at maturity, making sure that everybody understands where they're at, to enable them to make the right choices for them at that time.
Yeah, you remind me that one of my favorite authors is Mark Twain, and in the 19th century he wrote something, "For the fool saith, don't put your eggs all in one basket, and the wise man, he saith, put all your eggs in one basket and watch that basket." But I think this is a big tension on diversification. I hope to see more, perhaps, in fact, groups of companies allowing employees maybe to diversify into others who share their ethos and things like that. I think there could be some interesting moves going forward, because it's a tension there. If we're going to adjust the risk-reward basis of the employer-employee relationship so that they're aligning in this regard, then they are sharing that kind of risk. We've got to figure out how to diversify it appropriately without ruining that motivation. Anyway, the last question you sent me, what would I do? And I just thought I'd answer it, if you don't mind. I think it was really this idea. I know it's a bit woolly in a sense and a bit vague, and we had a comment about it, but set a common minimum expectation about broad-based share plans. I mean, I think, people who are coming in for that kind of final offer interview, or these days a final offer Zoom call, ought to be saying, and where is the share plan? And if on the other side, it ought to be, oops, we haven't got one and we should, or of course we've got one, what responsible employer wouldn't? And I think this is going to become more common, personally, post-COVID. As I said earlier, we're going to see, I think, a lot of questions about the role of the economy and the relationship with wider society, because wider society has had to dip in and save so many of our businesses by taking on a lot of those responsibilities. Anyway, those are my thoughts. But just before I close and thank everybody appropriately, Jennifer, Graham, any final comment you'd like to make?
Just final comment from me is I hope that this has kind of encouraged you to have a look at share plans, because we love them. We've been involved with them a long time, and we hope that they're going to be there for the next, as said, 40 years, because they are a brilliant way of rewarding employees.
Yeah, I completely echo that, Jen. And obviously, if you need an administrator, you know where to come.
Well, Malcolm Hurlston and Fred Hackworth have been promoting this since the ESOP Center began decades ago. So I'm only here carrying the torch that they carry. And they're still involved. And you'll note that this month's news pad, still edited by Fred, has some amazing articles. And I'm always stunned at Fred's ability to range widely and freely. And most importantly, he takes a genuine international perspective. It's not just about tax and schemes. We also have a series of bulletins, both on the reduced inequalities, the SDG 10 that was referred to in one of the questions, but also just on employee share ownership itself. So you can get a machine learning summary of the key points from leading articles. But it remains for me really to thank folks. And if I might, firstly, I'd just like to thank our sponsors again. You are very kind in allowing us to explore areas that we're interested in. I'd also like to thank you, the audience. We have a series of webinars coming up. Quite interestingly, David Craddock will be talking in some detail about the employee share trusts later this week. And we've got a whole other thing on awarding shares to employees next month. So there's a lot coming up. I won't bore you. Please visit the website. But it remains to me, if I might, to, on behalf of the audience, I'm afraid in these times of virtuality, I can't open up the screens and let everybody applaud. But we had over 40 people on the line, and we still have 40 people. But if I can, I will thank them virtually for you using my little Buddhist audience tapper.
Very good.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. Thank you very much, Graham. And would love to have you back, perhaps next year or something, as we discuss some of these policies going forward. Because I think there are opportunities for the nation to really engage with this in a way that hasn't been going since as strongly since the days of Le Mans. So thank you very much for being here. Look forward to seeing you again. And thank you, the audience. Take care, everyone, and ciao.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.